So, Skelton Thatcher Consulting have paid for meetup because it's not cheap.
No.
But yeah, Matt is Matt Skelton or Matt Thatcher. He's actually left, so I'm not sure if that company actually exists still.
Oh, right.
So,
Okay, well,
They're great guys. If you come across either of them.
yeah, and we have a post-sharp license to give away every. Who received one in the past? I ask you this every time. Have you tried it?
Yes,
And good.
good until you get to a build pipeline.
Okay.
If you're interested, talk to us. We have one to give away.
Yeah. I just thought, don't have to be a sponsor, but it's interesting to know what companies are here from Leeds. I mean, we usually talk about that in the pub, but you know, we've got Jet2, we've got Chris. Any other companies who?
Yorkshire Water.
Yorkshire Water.
Oh, right.
Nice one. I didn't know
Well,
that.
we do have an office in Leeds.
Yeah. Okay.
okay. Are you offering that?
Anyone else?
I'm going to ask.
Okay.
Really?
Thank you.
26. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Nobia.
What?
Nobia.
Nobia. That's good. Great.
Cycus for down calls.
Cycus. So what does Cycus do?
We make metering and billing platform.
You do what?
A metering and billing platform.
All right.
It's
Okay.
all in .NET.
All .NET, yeah. Cool. Any .NET Core?
Yeah.
Really?
.NET
Cool.
Core, yeah.
Nice. Well, I'll have to get you a drink later.
I love that. There's actually a look of pride on his face.
Yeah.
So
And
are you
it-
using .NET Core 2.1, which was released 2 days ago?
Not yet. As of
Not
tomorrow.
yet.
As of tomorrow, really? That's really impressive. So that was a nice segue into obviously the biggest news this month is Build and all the announcement. Although Ian said it was kind of lukewarm, there wasn't really much coming out of it. I thought Visual Studio Live looked quite good. As it did anyone see?
So, yeah, I really like the sharing.
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
It's great working.
So you can remote pair. You can hit F5 on someone else's.
Yeah, you can debug on someone else's machine.
Debug, yeah. That looked pretty cool.
Yeah, we're going to check that out, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. And I'm really getting convinced about what you were trying to send me on.
Oh, well, I'm going to bring that up.
Alright.
So we'll look at that. So .NET Core 2.1 is now released, which is great news. So it's, I mean, like Ian was just telling us before, it's going to be such an important release because Microsoft would have learned so much from the previous, couple of releases. So so many of the mistakes or glitches or inadequacies that were in previous releases are going to be fixed in this release. And if you haven't read any of the documentation, any of the release notes for this for 2.1, it's worth looking at because there are some really, really nice improvements, new classes and what have you.
Hands up, who's using .NET Core in production? To start using it.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Cool. So I've got down GDPR.
So,
I didn't write this down.
sorry to raise GDPR, but I've sent you all a privacy statement that you can review in detail, or just click delete on. Okay, but seriously, GDPR has more implications than just deleting all those privacy statements. You as developers need to do something about it, which is why I thought it would be a topic I could raise very briefly, so not to bore everyone.
Very briefly.
So if you have a disclosure in a breach in your organisation, you need to be able to disclose within 72 hours. Either are you risk the fine? And naturally, all of your organisations will have set up processes around that and authorisation. So when you as developers discover this breach, you will be able to disclose to the appropriate body within 72 hours. So if that happens over a holiday or anything like that, you will have to be taking responsibility to do that. You of course will all have written systems so any of your customers who go and request, I would like all of my data now, please. You'll all have made portals in the last few months running up to today, so they can go and access all of their data. And also the big delete button. If you have a customer and it says, I want all of my data deleted, then you have all the written systems by now, obviously. Some of you give me blank looks. So you can delete all of that personal identifiable information.
Reviewing all your foreign key constraints and
So some of you may have pursued anonymization policies on that and just blanked everything out. So there is no further personal information there, or some of you may not have thought of it yet. We're just going out. Training, obviously, training in data protection will have been built into your schedule. That is an essential ingredient of GDPR now. Anyone who deals with personal identifiable information must have training on how to deal with it. So obviously that will have been something that I mentioned to you.
I went to a PowerPoint presentation, it was informative.
Chris, what have Crisp done regarding GDPR?
I've stayed so far away from that, which is a good thing in my opinion.
Some work to do.
Jet 2? Pardon?
Yeah, let's take.
Yeah. I've had clients on Friday calling up saying, "Can you delete my?"
Has anybody here implemented anything that John's listed? What have you implemented?
We did a one-way hashing algorithm on personal identifiable information, so obviously you can't get the data back.
Right.
And that seems to be okay for now. We haven't really looked into database backups, because you're meant to do it
That's
with your backups
grey
as well.
area.
But then if you change...
It's not clear. It's absolutely not clear. It's all gone. It has to include backups as well.
What about Yorkshire Water? What have you had?
We've had training.
Training.
Everybody's had training.
All of that.
That won't get you out of the 20 million euro
We've
fine.
had training on the quiz. You had to pass the quiz to continue working.
So you can't even claim ignorance if you've had
If
training.
you've got trillions of lines of log files and there's even a small amount
Good
of
point.
personal information, that needs to go as well.
Yeah, John made that very good point. That got me a bit worried actually. But luckily we use Stackify and they only hold on to the log files for 30 days. So we're good because it's a 30-day grace period. Right?
Yeah. You're now obligated to protect data, so no clear text passwords or anything like that. Encryption of personal data, particularly in flight. You're now obligated to pursue continuous improvement practices around protecting data. So if the hashing algorithm you're using turns out to be exploitable, you now need to move on. You're obligated through threat of fines to do this work. But none of that will come any surprise to any of you because GDPR was 3 days ago.
You know what? This springs to mind. We should do this. We should do this for our Christmas meetup. This is like GDPR Christmas meetup.
I like there was a thing on social media going around with Samuel L. Jackson, in the Pulp Fiction, say GDPR one more time.
Okay, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, I thought we were going to talk about Bill, and then you snuck in GDPR.
I don't know anything about
Well, John, did you write the Microsoft now worth more than Google?
The market has been consistently rewarding Microsoft for its pursuit of the cloud. Google Cloud Platform is looking pretty much like an also-ran in terms of cloud infrastructure, so Microsoft are now worth more than Google by tens of billions.
Google or Alphabet?
Yeah, Alphabet.
Cool.
There you go. Microsoft goes open source. Who says there's no money in open source?
So the tech of the month. I know previous month we've done package of the month, and I said that we were going to kind of broaden it a little. Something that I've been looking at recently on recommendation of John, because it's not something I've even given any thought to at all, with Visual Studio Team Services. Hands up, anybody who's using VSTS? Okay. So hands up if you've not heard about it, or
You said VSTS?
VSTS. Yeah. So Visual Studio Team Services is essentially the team suite but online, and it's frankly amazing. What you get out of the box for free. I mean, one of the reasons I hadn't looked at it previous to now was because I thought it would be a rather expensive alternative to say Jira combined with Bitbucket combined with Octopus Deploy, etc., etc. But it's free. So the day that the morning that I uploaded my first repo, I got my Agile set up, got the repo set up, got it all hooked up to continuous integration, got the build path, got it notifying me when my build was successfully built, obviously. And that took just short of, I don't know, 35, 40 minutes to do all of that. And it was free. I get 5 users for free.
Private Git repositories.
Yeah,
I mean,
unlimited private Git
Yeah,
repositories.
that's worth, you don't need to go from GitHub or GitLab anymore, you just
Yeah,
do it through VSTS.
You've got the Kanban boards in there. You've got the
And you can create a branch from a ticket, can't you?
yeah. You can hook. Yeah, it's amazing. All the things you've got an enormous environment, a wealth of plugins. You can SonarCube and ticketing enhancements and things like that. So if you're looking for a replacement or an alternative to what you're using at the moment, or let's say you've got your systems kind of distributed in various places, seriously check out VSTS. I mean, I know when I was telling you about it, it sounded
convinced, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty, I love Jira and TeamCity and Octopus Deploy.
Yeah,
So it takes a lot for me to consider something else.
250 free build minutes a month.
Yeah.
So if you want to build something, when you're used to TeamCity, you have to set up a server and put it on and set it up and configure it. Whereas with VSTS, if you're not using it, it just sits there. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, one thing I didn't realize is that it includes everything. The
Yeah.
continuous delivery,
Yeah.
the Kanban stuff.
You can deploy through continuous deployment directly from VSTS into Azure, or you can web deploy through the CD into somewhere else. It's incredibly flexible. I mean, pretty much anything you could do with TeamCity, you can do with this. I think. So, any freelancers here? Okay. Are you using VSTS?
Yeah, we get a talk with today for STS, like CI.
Brilliant.
It's fantastic.
There we go. Shining endorsement from people who actually know what they're talking about. So yeah, if you get a chance, look it up because it really is amazing.
Can I just add to that? We've got it set up at my place to use private NuGet servers.
Yeah.
So I've got it hooked up, private NuGet servers into Azure Functions. So you just got packages so we just build libraries, shove them out into Azure, into the Azure Functions. So you've got nothing there essentially, just packages straight into a serverless environment.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So maybe if there's enough interest, we can get a talk on it maybe next year.
Maybe a good talk.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe the freelancers are looking at this.
You've done a talk already. Easy.
Okay. I mean, I'm just myself. I mean, I'll probably be saving close to £500 this next year
Yeah, I need to
on moving to that as a freelancer. So yeah, good tool. So
So the build, you said you watched a few build sessions, right? Was it, yeah. Did you watch any of the AI stuff, or what stood out for you?
Yeah, mainly working at the Visual Studio sharing stuff was fantastic, and a lot of the .NET Core stuff I was kind of getting up to speed with mainly, and they did quite a good talk. I'm sure you've probably watched it. But like exploring what's new and and all the Kubernetes stuff that we've been doing, what's really interesting.
I mean, you said early on, Ian, that Azure, Microsoft are focusing on Azure, but I'm pretty sure last year they said that AI is like also one of their main, what do they call it, like a main pillars or something. Yeah.
and IoT.
And IoT,
Yeah.
So they've invested a lot of money on it. I can't really say, it's on my list of things to watch.
Well, we've got some talks coming up which are going to touch on all these things, and hopefully we'll get some IoT. We'll get at least one IoT talk next year. Hopefully. So yeah, we're going to look at these. I mean, if you get a chance, have a look at the talks. I mean, start with the keynotes from Bill, because they just jump into quite a few really neat demos, especially the IoT ones, and that they actually code up from scratch some of the demos on stage live, and it's end to end, and it's really impressive. I mean, you'd expect it to be, wouldn't you? But
to be fair, all Microsoft demos are fantastic end to end when you come to use them.
Yeah.
You find flaws in the system that they brushed over.
That's very
Sure.
A bit cynical, admittedly, but
probably based on experience, right? Right. Okay. So
Next month.
Next month.
Next month. Measuring website and web app performance, HTTP2, compression, header management, putting all our tools together to comprehensively and continuously keep a watchful eye over our performance metrics should be a very interesting talk.
Yeah, it's kind of off the .NET path a little bit, but I think it's still going to be pretty relevant. And then, I mean, I'm really looking forward to the July one.
The bots,
Bot framework talk. I mean, this is going to be really interesting. If you've, has anybody had a look at the bot framework .NET? It's incredible. What you get out of the box, that combined with Lewis.NET, obviously it's talking to a couple of people. What you get out of the box combined with Lewis.NET and some other frameworks I'm sure you could throw into the mix, it's phenomenal. And the interface that they've given you is kind of a bit thrown together, and it's not all in one place. So some of it is now in Azure, whereas it had its own dedicated site. But then other bits haven't been moved into Azure yet, so you kind of have to jump over to another site to get, app IDs and what have you. But once you get through that, it is so easy to get something built, deployed, and integrated. I mean, I was doing some of it this week, and it's once you get over the hurdles of not knowing what the hell you're doing, it's really, really, really easy, really, really good stuff. So yeah, that talk is going to be, I think that talk's going to be good. So, do you want to introduce our speaker?
Let them introduce themselves.
right. Okay. So we're going to be talking about outside in test-driven development
With Ian Russell.
With Ian Russell. Yes. Yes. Welcome.
Okay, so my name's Ian Russell. I've travelled from central Birmingham today, 136 miles of fun-filled journey up the M1. It wasn't too bad actually. I've been to Leeds a few times, but I was saying earlier, this is the one city that I've been in where the railway station is not signposted. So I'm going through, and there's everything. Anything I wanted to do, aside from the railway station. But I had a rough idea where it was, and eventually got there, and unfortunately it was 2 lanes across on the left. So I decided to go into London driving mode, and just signalled and moved across. Seemed to work okay. It's excellent. So that's my Twitter handle, if you want to follow me. So I spend most of my time doing functional programming, rather than object-oriented programming. It's not because I don't like object-oriented programming, it's just I really like functional programming. But there is no functional programming tonight, it's all object-oriented.
You can throw in a bit of functional.
Not allowed to. Normally I'm very opinionated, and even with the mic on I probably still will be as well. So, what do we cover today? Well, I want to do testing 101 first, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. In terms of testing, I'll try and make it short as possible, and at least to try and explain. So if I say acceptance test, even if you don't agree with my definition of it, at least you understand what my definition is today for the talk. I'll then look at outside in, comparing it to the opposite style, which is inside out, or classic, or standard, or whatever you want to call it, old school. And then we'll just dive into some code. So that's more important than me jabbering on. Tell I don't do this all the time, I don't think. So, first one, most tests should follow 4-phase structure. Should always be set up, exercise your system under test, verify, you get the results you expect, and tear it down. So what's an acceptance test? For me, it's generally an end-to-end test, but you generally only test the code that you own. Now, don't always do that, so sometimes if I own the database, I'll run against the database. But if I'm running against an email service, for instance, sometimes I don't do that. We also, so where I work, we do acceptance tests, we also do end-to-end tests as well, which is a bit bizarre when I've just said this is end-to-end. But we have things that run from the UI that exercise absolutely everything. So we have smoke tests and stuff like that as well. Integration tests. So if you've got a third-party component or a third-party service, like an email service, you don't code against it directly. You stick an adapter around it, and you put an interface on that and work against that. But if you're testing normally, you never test against the proper service. So an integration test would always test against the real service. So we test our adapter against the real email service. If you don't do that, you find that the service changes under your feet and it doesn't work. Unit tests. Everybody heard this acronym before? FIRST? No? It's been around for a long time. So unit tests have to be fast. If they're not fast, you won't run them. Isolated or independent, depending on whose version you work with. If they're not isolated or independent, they obviously can impact each other. If they're run in a different order, you don't want them impacting each other. So, and also if you can run, excuse me, if you can run them in parallel, if they're isolated, you can do that. If they're not isolated, you can't. Repeatable. If you get different results every time, what's the point of having the test? It might be fairly obvious. Self-validating. If you have to go somewhere else to look at the results, it's pointless. You need to have it there and then right in front of you. The test needs to tell you whether it's succeeded or failed. And finally, timely. So you should write the test when you need to write the test. So I'm a believer in test first, but that doesn't mean that I haven't written code and written tests afterwards. So I'm not a zealot. I'm quite happy to do that on occasion. So, unit tests. Most of us do arrange act assert. Now obviously I've said the 4-phase tests. There are only 3 there. The teardown is implied in this. Most unit tests don't have a teardown because you don't have stuff you want to get rid of as a general rule. 1 logical assertion per test. That doesn't mean 1 assert, it means 1 logical assertion. So if one thing, you have to test 2 things in one go, that's fine. But it doesn't mean testing, verifying the mark and testing status code or something like that. So it just means one logical assertion. Test code is real code. You should treat it with the same respect and love that you treat the rest of your code. If you don't, you get into a bad place quickly. You get into a bad place fairly quickly. Same with test names as well. I've seen some wonderful test names over time. Spend as much time thinking about the names of your tests as you do your variables, as your function names. If you don't spend any time doing it, then please spend some time. It's important. Because when you go back to look at it over time, we spend more time reading code than we do writing it, a lot more time. So, and particularly with tests, it's important that you can look at the test, understand what it's trying to tell you, and read it very quickly. If you can't do that, it's probably a bad test.
Do you write the name first, or do you write the test first? Or is it?
So personally, I write the name first. So I generally write a list of things I want to test, and then I write the name of the test first. I know other people that don't. Other people say, "What do I want to do?" So they do a assert first. So they'll write a holder, and then they'll work out what they want to assert, and then go back to the name. Personally, I think it's important to write the name first. You need to understand what you're trying to test before you test it. But I'm not a zealot. You know, if it works the other way for you, brilliant. You know, it doesn't matter. As long as you write good tests, that's the important thing. And finally, as small as possible. I've worked on a few projects where the tests have been like that, because there's that much setup. That's not a good test. Even if it turns out to test something really important, if you can't read it and understand it very quickly, it's not a good test. So you need to find a way of getting particularly all the builder stuff out and make it very quick and easy to read and understand what's going on. Excuse me. So, mocking. This is the one and only time I have ever quoted Wikipedia in a talk. I'm told it's not the safest source to go to, but this seems pretty reasonable for me. So mock objects are simulated objects that mimic the behaviour of real objects in controlled ways. I think that explains them really well, from my perspective. Back in the old days, we used to have spies and fakes and various other things. The modern way of looking at mocking is looking at it in two ways. So you've either got a stub, which will return known data in a test, but you don't verify against it, or it's a mock, which you verify against. So they're two different things. That should be it most of the time. So, outside in. There's been a lot of talking recently about outside in, as though it's a new thing. It's not. It's been around since, well, 1999 actually. So there are a few guys in London at the London Extreme Tuesday group in the extreme programming community, who got together and raised some ideas about what happened if we got rid of getters. You know, what impact would that have on our code, on our Java, particularly Java code, which is the community they were in. And they got talking, and as you do in the pub, you know, and somehow it got onto this. And 6 months later, they came out with a sort of a paper. They raised it as an idea. The problem was, everybody hated it. And the reason they hated it was Java reflection was really poor. So it didn't do the things they wanted to do. You had to jump through lots of hoops to get what you wanted out of it. But in that intermediate period between 2000 and 2006, when the next paper came out, Java got better. And it actually got really good. So Steve Freeman and Tim McKinnon wrote a paper in 2006 about mocking, about a different style of testing. And that's where this outside-in testing came from. In concert with that, there was a guy called Nat Price. So he was part of the XP community in London as well. And he started working on JMock. And JMock implements all the features they required for mocking that had come from this paper. And then it took 4 years until the book came out. Anybody read that? Growing Object-Oriented Software Guided by Tests. So there's 2.5 hands. Or 3 maybe, okay. This is one of my top 10 all-time programming books. You know, this is if I said, you know, read a book on object-oriented programming, this is probably what I'd point you at. It's written in Java, but it's quite easy for a C# dev to work from Java into .NET. I'm surprised at the numbers actually. I thought there'd be a lot more people having read this. So, really recommend you buy this and read it, obviously.
Not just put it on the bookshelf.
Yeah, this is my 3rd copy. I've lent the other 2 copies to other people, and they've sort of not given it back. So that's my 3rd copy of that one. So yeah, it's commonly known as GOOS. So Growing Object-Oriented Software Guided by Tests. It's a fantastic book. So what is the real difference between the two? So I'm actually going to start the opposite end, the inside out, traditional style. Traditional style is generally verification of state. And it's about things like triangulation, and it's really easy to do. You do a kata, a nice easy little fizz buzz or something like that, and TDD's dead easy. You know, it's you think, wow, you know, how can this be useful? You know, or I'm writing tests, I'm getting code done. And actually that's the problem people have. You know, it's dead easy to pick up, but how do you then take that to your day job? How do you take these little skills that you've learned and put them on a code base that isn't probably how it should be? And that for me is one of the things that outside in solves for me. So the difference with outside in is that we start with an acceptance test. We don't start with a unit test. So we start with something, a business requirement, a business feature, rather than me as a dev thinking, what does this need to do? You know, because I can think of all sorts of things that it needs to do. And I could spend 2 weeks writing all sorts of stuff, lovely code, really well written, you know, really nicely tested, and everything else, and 5% might actually get used. So the rest of the time I've written code is pointless. Also, because I'm writing the client, it's me that's saying this is how the code works. Whereas if I'm driving from a feature, the feature is determining how the code works, which is a very different way of looking at it. It will make more sense when we get into code. So the primary thing with outside in is we validate behaviour rather than state. It's not to say we don't validate state, but we're trying to validate behaviour more, which is where the mocking comes in, because you have to have something to verify against. The other one is, anybody heard of command query separation? By Bertram Meyer. Okay, that's more hands, that's better. It's still quite a low number. Also notice, sorry about this, but it's the older people in the room that seem to have heard of this. I'm in that group, by the way. So Bertram Meyer was the inventor of a language called IFL, which is a very object-oriented language. And his theory was that all things at a method level needed to be one of 2 things. They needed either to be a command, and that mutated state but didn't return anything, or it was a query which returned something but didn't mutate state. And that's a really hard thing to do in Java and C#. In fact, it's almost impossible to do. But if you write in a language like IFL or Smalltalk, proper object-oriented language, actually it works really well. But it makes you think in a completely different way. You know, things like Java and C# make it so easy for us just to do some work and return some data. You know, this is saying you can't do that. You need to be much more disciplined about how you work, about how you write code. This isn't strictly part of outside in, but this is something that everybody should do. People seem to have forgotten it. The walking skeleton. iteration 0, whatever you want to call it. The first thing you do on a project is you create an end-to-end release of the thinnest possible piece of work that you can do. So you write a piece of code and you get it all the way through to production, or all the way through to ready to be released. So when you add new features, they're ready to go out. If you think about it, a feature's only useful if you can release it. You could write hundreds of really good features, but if you've not got in a position to release it, what's the point? So get it into a state where you can release code immediately. We also know if you don't concentrate on how you're going to deliver it at the end, at the beginning, what you do is you write lots of lovely code and then think, how are we going to release this? And you spend a lot more time trying to undo what you've done to get it to release. It's much easier when you've got a clean slate to choose a really clean pattern to release things. Lots of people seem to have forgotten this. Lots of people seem to have got rid of the idea of iteration 0. It's all, you know, we do features, we do features, we do features, and then at some point they think we need to release this. And you spend almost the same amount of time you spend writing these initial 40 features to release it. You know, get it done at the start and start adding features. You don't have to release, it has to be ready to be released.
Sort of like the opposite of technical debt, could you say?
I'm
No?
not sure I call it technical debt.
No,
It's
I mean the opposite. So you don't fuck around with shortcuts.
well, you're always going to get technical debt from other things, but you are going to get releasing is probably the hardest thing we do. Yeah, so getting that in a good place means that you can work towards a known release style or release standard. If you get 20 people working on a code base, they will work in 20 different ways. And combining those 20 things together may or may not work when you come to release it. But if you start off with, this is how we work, this is the structure of everything we do, copy that style, and everybody fits into that. That works a lot better. I know from lots of experience of having not done that, that you know, even something as short as 3 months, having code in 3 months and then trying to release it, we spent nearly 3 months trying to release it afterwards.
One of the benefits as well of the walking skeleton is you can ensure that things like database connectivity is in place and file reports are open, etc. Rather than struggling with it at the end.
Yeah, I mean permissions, we work in Azure, you know, we've got on-premise stuff as well as Azure, we go through Azure Service Bus, we've got all sorts of connections we need to set up, firewall ports we need to open up, you know, it's all that sort of stuff. If you can get that done first, that's out of the way. You know, you concentrate then on delivering features, delivering value. As I said, it doesn't matter how many features you've got, if they're not in production, they're of no value.
You can't be an agile developer, an agile team if you don't do that.
You'd be surprised.
There's a lot of people who claim to be agile.
Yep.
It's agile with bunny quotes, that's the thing. Yeah.
Well, I'll promise not to do that today.
That's right.
So my background's extreme programming, but I spend most of my time introducing good coding practices into Scrum teams. You know, and this is one of the things that gets in straight away.
Does this relate to minimum viable product, or is that some?
Oh yeah, I mean, minimum viable product has still got to be releasable.
Yeah.
You know, it's still.
Is it, would you say it's the same thing, or it's just like some?
It's part of the same thing. You know, minimum viable product is the minimum number of features you need to release to give it to the customers, which is often a lot less than you think. So, outside in. First thing we do is write an acceptance test. A failing acceptance test. Obviously you can't write a passing acceptance test, that would be a bit silly. But, so you write a failing acceptance test and then you go into the red-green refactor. So write a failing unit test, refactor, pass, make a pass, refactor, loop through, keep going. And when you're finished, at some point, you'll have a passing acceptance test. So one of the big things that's different from this type of style to inside-out TDD is this acceptance test could be failing for quite a while, depending on how much code you need to write. quite a while could mean most of a day, could mean more than a day. And for the classic TDD people, this is a big no-no. But there's no other way of doing it. You know, the important thing is that you're still in TDD mode on the rest of your code.
Is it possible you check in failing acceptance testing to
Yes, so we work in Git. We create a branch, a short feature branch. We accept that it may go in overnight. You know, we always check in before we finish, even if it's going to fail, because it's up there on the cloud. You know, if your machine goes down, it's more common sense than anything else.
It's often considered a big no-no.
Sorry, say again.
It's often considered to be a big no-no checking in.
Well, it depends. If you're in Git and on branches, so this was it's a no-no to check in code that you know is going to fail the build. On the whole, yes. If you're on main, master, trunk, whatever you happen to be, and it's going to go red, absolutely. You know, don't do it. Get it working. You know, stay until 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever you need to do. Get it working. But if you're on a feature branch, the feature branch can fail. You know, if you start one an hour before the end of the day, and it's going to take 2 days to get the work done, you know, what you're going to do, either leave the stuff on your computer and hope it doesn't crash. You know, it's common sense, really. So, but yes, there are people that do say don't check it out. I don't believe in that at all. You know, modern source control systems should be able to cope with it quite easily.
You can do tests that pass with warning, so like spec flow has this inconclusive. So like if you fill in gaps, you can have loads of tests that are like inconclusive, not implemented yet.
Yeah,
So
you can put ignore on.
Like failing a build, you know, if you want to be sort of more strict with that.
To be honest, I don't think it's worth the effort. But you know, it depends on your house rules. You know, if your rules are that you don't pass in, you don't check in failing builds, then fix it before you go. You know,
Of course, if you know it gets fixed, that's a different story.
Yeah, it just seems a bit pointless to me, but you know, that's just my view of the world. So outside in is acceptance test first, failing acceptance test, and then we start writing unit tests with the standard red, green refactor. Keep doing that as and when we need it, and at some point this will go green. Once it's gone green, it should stay green. Just the same as your other tests. So if it doesn't go green, you undo what you did and fix it. So this is basic idea of what we're going to try and do. So the idea is to find collaborators. So if you start off with a class, you want to do 2 or 3 things with it. You don't want to do that in that particular class. What you want to do is to have other classes doing it for you, and that's what collaborators are. So they're just other classes that help you do the job you need to do. So outside in is about finding collaborators. It's about finding roles that you need other things to do. It'll become obvious when we get into code how all this fits together. And what you basically do is just drive down. So you start at the top and drive down until you finish. You need no more collaborators. With that, I'm going to go to some code. I'm probably going to be in people's way, I guess, but I'll try my best. Sorry, I need my glasses. I tried the bifocals. Oh, they drove me nuts. So I'm on separate glasses now. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on a bank kata.
Can anyone back see that? Zoom.
Sorry?
Do you want to zoom in and text them?
Sorry?
Will the projector go off?
Yeah, does that mess up the live stream? If we
I can change the font size. It's all right.
better?
Not better?
Bottom
Yeah, that sends me nuts. Do people want that bigger than that? Yes, no? I'll make it one bigger. Probably don't even need those now. Oh, blimey, right. Okay. I can probably see this in Sheffield. So, requirements of this: it's a simple bank account. It's a simple kata. So I do katas quite regularly, of various kinds. So I do some so that I can practice my resharper shortcuts. Some so that I can try out different ideas. Some so I can try different languages. They're just useful things. They're just little things that you should know how you generally structure it, and then just have a try with, with another language, or just try and practice. They're worth doing. Spend half an hour on it. It's just good practice. Certainly, if you're learning resharper shortcuts, it's a fantastic way to do it.
You do that every day or once a week?
When I feel like it. Sometimes I'll do half an hour at work. It just depends. It's if you've been pairing with people for quite a long period of time, and you've finished all the work you can do for the day, sometimes I'll just chill out and just do a kata. And another couple of people do it as well. So, kata is a simple thing. It's a very basic bank account. Too basic, obviously, but it's a first attempt. So we can deposit money, we can withdraw money, and we print a statement to the console of the transactions. So dead easy. And the acceptance criteria, we've got a nice little table that needs to be printed out to the console, and that's after the customer's performed a set of transactions. I've also got an account class as well, and I can't change that account class. So you'll notice there that I've got 3 void methods. So I can't test state here. I'm going to have to test something. I'm going to have to find another way of doing this. So I talked about collaborators. So I've got my account class here. I've just got not implemented, and I also have an acceptance test as well, which is over here. You'll notice that I haven't used anything like spec flow. I haven't used given when then or anything like that. That's not to say that they're wrong. I personally don't like them. I prefer writing proper code rather than relying on the tool. I also find that despite the fact that we have good conversations with our business analysts and our product owners and our domain experts, trying to get them to talk in given when then style is pretty much impossible. So what we tend to do is we tend to draw flowcharts, and from the flowcharts we write tests. It seems to work for us. Wow.
It's really sad. We're not complaining about the weather. No,
You live in Leeds and you complain about the sun.
No.
So yeah, so I've written a simple you can stand and block the sun out. So a simple acceptance test that creates an account. I'm going to deposit some money, withdraw some money, and then just print the statement. And then I'm going to verify that some data happens. So this is using nsubstitute, which is a fairly new mocking tool. Fake It Easy is really good as well. They've taken away a lot of the over-the-top stuff that's developed over time and just gone down to bare basics again. And if you need anything more than bare basics, you're probably doing the wrong thing.
You mentioned mocks versus stubs.
Yes.
In the original talk, whereas any substitute there's no mocks and stubs.
That is true, but there is in Fake It Easy.
Yeah, I'm just saying if you.
I know.
Yeah.
but the difference is, as long as you can read it. If you're the difference between a mock and a stub is you verify against the mock, and you just return data from a stub. So it's easy to view. It's easy to tell what role they're playing.
Substitutes have the nicest syntax in that you don't end up in this double lambda hell where you say setup.
Yeah, compared to rhino mocks, for example.
Yeah, so most mocking frameworks will have the dot setup, the method returns, whereas in substitute you just call the method directly. Which
Love
is
it.
a lot.
It's great.
Yeah. As I said, fake it easy does it slightly differently, but it's just as nice. You know, some people prefer it. It's a mocking tool. You know, don't use it too much. Use it for things it's intended for. Nothing else. You know. So this has a received in order, so they have to come in the correct order. So obviously I've got a failing acceptance test. Now I can't do anything at the moment until this at least builds. So the first thing I need to do is to build it. So I'm going to so I need a console. I need to output to the console. So the simplest thing to do here is just create a mock. So I'm going to do okay, and now I need an iConsole. So if I go to my iConsole, and I need I think it's print line. With a string and so if I save that, hopefully, well not hopefully, it will obviously work. So if I run the test, hopefully it will fail. But what would it fail for? Okay, at the moment it's failing for the wrong reason. So it's not failing for the reason that I expect it to fail. So the reason I'd expect it to fail is for either it not receiving these things in the correct order, or not receiving these at all. At the moment I'm getting a not implemented. And I know that that's coming from the account because I haven't implemented the deposit. So, what do I do? Well, at this point, I go off to the whiteboard. I go and find somebody, and we talk through this. And we start looking at the requirements that we've got. And we start writing down interesting things that are in the requirements.
On the whiteboard.
On the whiteboard, yeah. Yeah, no UML, nothing like that. All we want is a basic idea of what we're trying to do. So there's some obvious things that stand out on this. I've got concept of a statement. I've got transaction in there. So they're things that I might be interested in. There are also things that I know the name of as well. So I don't call them something different. I'm going to use the names that they've used. But I also need some other things. I need some help to do two things. I need some help to do the deposit and withdraw, and I need help to print the statement. Now what I generally do in those cases is I literally write an interface that tells me the role that I want these things to perform. So in the case of depositing and withdrawing money, I want something that stores transactions. So I will literally write I store transactions as an interface. It tells me what it's doing.
Are these your collaborators then?
Yes. So these are my collaborators. These are the things that I need to help me do the work. So if I go into account, at the moment deposit and withdraw are not implemented, and neither is print statement. So if I create an interface called I store transactions, okay, So where does that need to go? Well, I need to inject that into the account class, because the account class needs to use this. So I need to create a public constructor that takes an iStore transactions, so I've got one of those. So if I build this now, what's going to happen? I'm hoping that my acceptance test won't build. So if I go and have a look at my acceptance test, obviously because I've created a constructor and I'm injecting something in, I now need to inject something into here. Okay? And I can do that in two ways. I can do it as a mock initially. So transaction store. Again, build it, run my tests, run all the tests that I've got, and build error. Oh, I've got a console as well, I forgot about that. Right. You're not looking at this. This is just a separate thing. So we'll ignore him and run all my tests. And I've still got the system not implemented exception. So I need to fix that. So how do I fix that? Well, I'm going to deposit some money. That's the first thing I do. So if I do an transaction store dot, right, I've got nothing in there at the moment. So I've got two ways I can go here. I can follow the same pattern, so I can do deposit and withdraw as separate methods on the interface. So they're separate. The advantage of that is that I can send in positive values and let the transaction store manage any negatives if it wants to. So it can manage the business logic for how it stores it. Or I can create one method that takes a value and I send the negative value in for the withdrawal. Now from my perspective, I prefer the first way. I prefer letting the thing that does the saving the data or the controlling of the transactions, let that manage the logic of that. The account shouldn't know anything about this. So we'll do that. Oops. And I'll do the same for withdrawal as well. So then I can go into my account and I can do transaction store dot deposit okay. So if I save that, run my tests.
What do you think of continuous testing?
I've never used it. Some of the guys in the office use continuous testing, they love it. So
What, the .cover one or the Encrunch?
they've got Encrunch. Yeah, they absolutely love it. It's I don't know. It's I've got my machines in the office set up so that I can do a key press to run my tests. So I don't know. I mean, it's nice. It's nice when it you know, when things go red and then you do something and suddenly it goes green. So it's nice from that perspective. But it's when you've got ReSharper on there already, and then you stick something like nCrunch on as well. Unless you've got a really quick machine, your machine just slows quite a lot. And if you want to move to something like code, you haven't got anything like that anyway. So, you know, do you rely on the tools?
There is I forget the name of it, but there's an extension that Scott Hanselman uses that does sort of live testing as you go through it, and you get the red, green, amber.
Oh, okay. I'll be interested to find out about that.
So JetBrains have got a continuous testing as well. It's not like brain testing.
Yeah, I mean, it's personal preference. You know, if you think it helps you by not having to press a button every time, you know, it's the thing for me is a lot of this is habit. You know, if you get out of the habit of doing it because the tools do it for you, if you then have a machine that doesn't have those tools on, if you go and work for another company and they won't pay for the license, you know, you have to relearn how to work again. But it's personal preference. You know, I'm not. You know, one of the problems with pairing is the fact that everybody's machines are completely different. You know, so you've got to learn. You know, I've got guys that have got Macs. I've got guys that have got use the light screen. So I use the light screen for presentations, but I work on the dark screen because I prefer it's not as bright for me working, you know, particularly with wearing glasses. But lots of the other people in the office use the light screen. They have different fonts than me. It makes a big difference. We also have a couple of guys that come from Java. They come from IntelliJ, and they use the IntelliJ bindings for ReSharper, and I use the Visual Studio ones. So, you know, there's a load of issues with that. Right. So this is now failing because withdraw isn't implemented. Let's go and do that one. Okay, and that's now failing because the print statement isn't implemented. But I'm not going to implement that at the moment. I'm going to go into the transaction store and work on that. Because what I want to do is I want to get rid of that mock that's in the feature. I want a real implementation in there if I can, rather than a mock.
So what's the outside in part then?
Starting from the acceptance test.
All right. So yeah, okay.
So you start with a feature request. You implement the feature. So you're working from the outside and then writing code underneath it. It's just a TDD is you start with a small class and you implement that, and then you do other classes. So you build bigger things out of smaller things.
It still feels very much like TDD though, doesn't it?
Well, it is, because I'm doing TDD. Yeah, it's just where we started is very different. I'm glad it feels like TDD. Okay, so I need to implement a one of these. So I'm going to create a concrete type. Call it transaction store. Implement the members. I'm going to move it to its own class out of the way, just because that's how everything works. Right, and now I can start writing tests on this class. So I actually have a proper implementation of this. So all I'm going to do with this, I'm just going to create a simple list in the background, a backing list. I'm not going to do anything special like talking to a database or anything. This is just a very simple thing.
So that's how you get rid of these long tests, isn't it? These long setups is that all stuff should be in collaborators more, and then you should test the collaborators, and that's why you have these big setups, because you don't have enough collaborators, is that?
Could that be true?
It's part of it, but some people just have big setups because you've got lots of stuff to set up. You know, if you're setting up, I mean, we obviously sell fashion to young 20-somethings, you know, and an order contains an awful lot of information, you know, and setting up an order for an acceptance test takes a lot of effort. You know, if you've got a little bit of data, it's very quick and easy to do it. If you've got to set up an order that's got probably 150 fields on it, or probably 10 different classes, it takes a lot of effort. You know, it depends on your data really. But this certainly does drive me towards lots of smaller classes, and less code as well, because I only write the code that I need to satisfy the features rather than what ifs. So,
Will you usually take a break? You want to take a break? Or we just
yeah, we can take a break for 5 minutes. Yep.
whenever you want.
Or now if you want.
Yeah.
Yep. Take 5.
Take a break for 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Okay, we're back in position again. Right. So we got to the stage where I'm going to implement a real instance of an iStore transactions, call it transaction store. I need to write some tests for it. So this is all the code will be on GitHub, by the way, so you'll be able to download it and laugh at it at your heart's content. Right, so I need to write a test. So what I need to do, what I'm going to be doing is implementing the transaction store. So what I need to do first of all is to write my first test. So I'm going to do a simple one. I'm going to do that a deposit gets stored in the transaction store. So save deposit in store. Right. So I need to var up a new and then I need to deposit an amount. It's an int. The reason I'm doing it as a constant outside is I want to verify that that's being saved, or that's part of the call that's being saved. So, how do I test this?
You're going to need something inside the transaction store to represent the transaction.
I am, yep. So, oops. So, now I've got two options here. I can either start mocking, or I can start adding something to the transaction store that allows me to get some data back out. So I've already said that I'm going to have some form of backing store. Now remember earlier I said that there are a couple of words that I used, domain words that are in there that I can use. There was statement and transaction, and obviously this is a transaction, so but I want a list of them. So I need to create a new class. Let me do that in here. By default, I tend to make all my classes immutable. I just got into the habit of doing it. It means if I want to put stuff across separate threads or separate cores, I don't care about it. You know, I've got no state that's shared between the various instances. It's one of those things that when you learn functional programming, you immediately start making everything read-only and immutable and annoying people. So I've got a transaction there. I've got a right. Still can't do anything. Still no way of testing this. So I'm going to cheat. So, unfortunately, if I do this, I'm going to get a passing test. So, I'm going to roll back a little bit. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to assert that the transaction store list of transactions I get contains one item that adds up to 1,000, or adds up to whatever I sent in. So my expected is amount, and what I'm going to compare against is Can't convert from int to string.
Not created that getter. Oh, sorry, the getter for an
I have, haven't I? It's on there. Text that. Sorry? Close it and switch the computer off and turn it back on again. Yeah.
The syntax is equal.
Yeah, I know why. Because I haven't done. Yep. Okay, so if I run my test. Whoops, didn't want to do that. I'll run it from here. So I've still got a failing test there. I've got a failing test here because it's not implemented. So if I implement it, so if I run all the tests, so I've finally got a magical test passing. So I'll do the same for withdraw. So I'll write my failing test again, so I'll just copy that one. Because it's a withdraw, it's going to be a negative amount. No, it isn't. It's a positive amount, but I need to check that it's a negative amount when I go there. So if I run my tests, of course this one's going to fail because I haven't implemented it yet. So if I go and implement my run my test. So they're both passing now, but my acceptance test is still failing. One thing I haven't done at the moment is in my requirements, at the moment all I'm passing through is the amount. But in my result set, I need other things as well. So I need to think about the date and I need to think about the balance. Now the date's a fairly easy one to think about because I need to generate a date and I need to be able to manage it. So I'm going to need a mock of something that manages time. But what about the balance? Should I calculate the balance in the transaction store or should I do that on the fly? Does it matter? You could argue either way. So I'm not going to do it in the store. I'm going to leave it until I calculate it when I get the value out. But I am going to do the store. So I've found another collaborator that I need. So the transaction store needs a clock of some kind. There are two ways of doing this. I'm going to do it the quick and easy way. There's another way called ambient context as well. So if you read the DI books, they talk about ambient context. So things that you can get by read only that are always available. So things like date time and the GUID generation and what's the other one? The cryptography, the random number stuff. So if they're always available and read only, you can use ambient context. And the idea is you can just override it when you need it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just use an interface and and inject a clock in. So inside here I need to inject I'm going to call it iClock. I don't know why it's habit to call it iClock. Certainly in the Java world it's habit to call iClock. Don't know why. So what I need effectively is a timestamp. So I'm not following the pattern that I followed before. So really I should call this iGenerate a timestamp, because I'm thinking about the role that this thing performs. So that's what I'll do. Okay. Obviously, I don't need to. If I never wanted to test this, I don't need to create this interface, because I'm never going to change it. If all I'm interested in is a timestamp, I can just put datetime.now or datetime.utc now. But I can never test it in a manageable way. So if I'm going to pass if I'm going to pass a timestamp in, I need to do that as well. I need to change the transaction. So that now needs a date time. Oops, wrong one. So back to my transaction store. And I need to put a method on it. So I need a okay, so just going to put a property on there. So that's my transaction, that's my transaction store. Okay, so now, because I've added that to the transaction store, I need to obviously implement that as well. And obviously this is a mock, so oops, can't spell. So substitute dot okay, obviously have my timestamp in. So what about my assertion? Also need to do that for the other one as well. Is my assertion good enough? At the moment, all it's verifying is that the total value is correct. Now I've got a timestamp, I obviously need to check that as well. Remember I talked about one logical assertion? Well, I need to check this as well. So the easiest way for me to do this is just put another assertion in. It's still one logic. I'm still validating the transaction. But now that I've got the mock, sorry, now that I've got the stub in this case, because all I'm going to do is use it to return the set value that I know about. So just the same as I've had constant there.
See, I think the testings are incorrect.
Okay.
Because you're not saving the deposit, you're saving the transaction to the stub. And then that would be one logical assertion.
Yep.
The name as it is, you've got two assertions.
Okay. Yeah. That's very true.
Wouldn't that be the same transaction in store as deposit?
Possibly, yeah. Which is why I don't like them little tiny names.
But you're not at the front typing all this. Yeah, there's a balance between writing something that's readable and understandable, and you can go back to it and it tells you what it does, and brevity. There's a balance between the two. I've probably gone too far the brevity side just to save typing. So I obviously need to I need to return a value out of the timestamp. Well. So timestamp dot UTC now dot returns today. So this is using the substitute that we've got as a stub. So it's just returning a known value. So what I'm going to do is now verify what am I going to verify? Well, I've got transactions, so I've got all the transactions. So if I take today and then is equal to is dot equal to dot first in fact I can just do dot first, can't I? And then so I'm asserting that what I get out of that that's saved in the transaction is today. And hopefully if I run the test, that will all pass. Okay, so I've got 2 unit tests passing and one acceptance test failing still. And I should do the same with the second one as well, but I'm not going to, so I need to get onto the other side of this story as well. So the other side of this was the printing the statement. So I've got an iStore transactions. I also need a iPrint statements. Seem reasonable? So we'll go for one of those then. iPrint statements. This is one of those situations where ReSharp was trying to be helpful but is not. So if I'm going to print a statement, I might as well pass a statement in. But obviously a statement doesn't exist at the moment, so let's go and create a statement. Let's leave that where it is for the moment. So that now passes, that now builds. And I go back to account, sorry. So I need to inject in the iPrint statements. Okay, see what we got with that then. Let's try running tests, see what happens. Okay, so I'm in my feature. I need to have a mock for the. Actually, I can get rid of the transaction store mock now. So I've got a concrete implementation that I can use. I don't need to use the mock anymore. And it needs a clock. What do they call this? I generated timestamp. Get in there. Right, so that takes one of those. So take a timestamp. An account needs. So at the moment, I only have the. I don't have the statement printer at the moment, so I'm going to do a mock for the moment. Should call it a substitute because if it's n substitute, then it's a substitute for a real thing. So I print statements. Okay. Run the test again, see what happens. Now that's looking more interesting. So I've gone from the non-implemented, I'm now getting to the stage where it's failing because my expectations are failing. So it's failing for the right reasons now, not the wrong reasons. It's taken me a while to get there, but it's worth it because I've separated things out into separate classes. I've got little helpers, little collaborators that do little jobs for me. And now I'm going to do the last bit that gives me the final print bit. So I now need an implementation of iPrint statements. Let's go and shift that to its own class, out the way. Right. So what we've got currently is we have, if I go back to my requirements.
Quick question. Are all of these shortcuts you're using through ReSharp?
Yes.
Every single
Yes, sorry.
Anything else is a problem?
Yes. Yeah, Alt and Enter, Shift, Alt and R. Yeah, there's a few commands that most of these have been Alt and Enter, and that gives you most of the refactoring things very quickly. Yeah, generating stuff is quite quick. if I could type, I'd get 10 times the amount of work done. Yeah, it's a good job. Most of my work is thinking and not typing. So that's probably why I can't type very well. Yeah. So at the moment we've got transaction, which is okay, but we probably want something else to print. I want something else within the statement. So I'm going to introduce a statement line, and that statement line is going to take a transaction and just convert it into something that we can view. So if I go and have a look at statement, so if I do a statement line, and a statement line is going to take a date time, it's going to take an amount, and it's going to take a balance as well. So all the things that I need to appear on that final screen. Oops. Press too many. Yeah, if you haven't got ReSharper and you do C# day to day, buy ReSharper. Even if the company won't get it, buy it yourself. It's a massive time saver. So that's a new class, got that. So if I go to statement, so statement's going to be a list of statement lines. That's what I want to return, but I want to take a list of transactions and convert them. So I've got two choices. I can either take them in the constructor, or I can use them later in a method. So I've got two choices. So I've got two choices on that. So let's have a look at what's the most sensible. So I get the transactions from the transaction store. So I already have something that gets transactions, something that stores transactions available in the account class already. So I think it probably would be a good idea for me to inject the transactions, get the transactions out, and inject them into the statement, so it builds the lines for me. Yeah? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And what I want to do out of this, I want to get a list of statement lines out. I'll do that for the moment, don't need to go any further. So that's that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in the list of transactions. And because I cheated earlier, well, it's not on the interface. So because I cheated earlier and put it on the method, on the transaction store, I should have a get all transactions available. That's already there for me to use. But obviously I didn't put it on the interface because I didn't need it at the time. So I store transactions. So let's have a look at transaction store and see exactly how that's implemented. obviously that should be get transactions, not get transaction. So I'm going to rename that. Back to account again. So that should be enough for that. Run all my things again. Right, so I'm getting there, but not by. So I'm still in the same position that I was, but I at least I've got the transactions in there now. So if I pass the transactions in, I should at least have something. So I need to write some tests. So I'll write some tests around the. Do we finish at 9? Sorry. Thereabouts. Okay.
You'll have people start walking out.
Oh, okay. Right. I'll tell you what I do, I'll ignore that. So, but what I do is write tests around this and get that to work. The only thing I need to do is I need to get the, I need to do two things. I need to fix the, what am I, fix the, sorry, the account test. So now that I've got a proper class for statement printing, I can create one of those instead. Would I call it print statements? I don't know if I did. I thought I called it statement printer, I have to say. No, I did call it print statements. Okay. So the only thing I've got to do now is to get the header and all the data sorted out. So let's quickly do that. And I'm going to do that by cheating. Actually, I'm not. Where I was. I'm there, right. So, actually I need to do statements as well, don't I? So I've left that as returning a list at the moment. So what I've got currently is transaction, and what I need to do is convert it into statement lines. So I need a little bit of link. So if I go undersort transactions, that's going to bug me, so I'm going to fix that. Hopefully it doesn't go too far. So we're going to use the select method on this. And we're going to do statement line. So I need the date time, so I need x dot timestamp, x dot amount, comma, balance. What do I do about balance? Well, actually, select will do it for me. Okay, so that's an IEnumerable, and it's returned to as a read only. So as note.
Two lists first.
Sorry.
Do two lists and then can you have it shouldn't cast, I think. If you do two
Yep.
lists. But
There we go.
semantics are you can cast it back if you read on.
Okay, so that may or may not work. We'll find out. So I've got to run the tests again. So I'm still failing. So back to so that's statement. That's doing all of that. Back to account. That's okay. Back to feature. I've got nothing on top here. I know what I've done. I haven't got a console yet. So I have an iConsole, which I've already got. So I already created iConsole earlier on to get the feature to pass to build initially. I need to inject that. So into my feature, I've got the console there. Into print statements. So I need to take that. It's only one of those. I need an console. You actually do the same thing over and over and over again. This is what TDD's like. It's just the red, green refactor, the right bits of code, get it to pass. So that's my console. So printing a statement, I need to do so underscore console dot print line okay, and then I need to do my I need to take the statement, don't I? So statement dot I can't remember how I did this earlier. So I am going to cheat now. So I did another version of this as well.
You for each loop with
I am going to be doing something like that. I'm just trying to remember which way I did it. I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's going to take away from. Oh, I actually did this slightly differently. Okay, so I did all the work in there. So it doesn't matter which way you do the work, but this does pass its test in the end. I did this exactly the same. Well, I'm going to stop there with this. So if I run all of those, so this is obviously the one that I know works, so it should all go green. I'll just show you the acceptance test just to show that it's no different than the one that was already there. All I've got is a setup method here rather than in line, but everything else is exactly the same. And the only thing that I've had to do is I've had to control the clock. Because obviously I've got dates set on those, I need to pass in the dates correctly, and all of the mocking tools allow you to do things like this. So allow you to send in an array of date times. So they'll use the first one for the first one, second one for the second, third for the third. So it's a nice, easy way of controlling in order. show from there. That one? That one. Oh. Right. So I didn't quite get there. I think it's getting on anyway. So what I did was write a failing acceptance test, got it to at least build, and then started finding my collaborators, finding the things that I needed to help me to do my job, to perform, to create that feature. What I try to do is to create interfaces that tell me the role that it's playing, and then obviously create classes from there. It's just a stylistic thing. You don't have to do that, but I like it because it tells me what job it's doing. So when I come back to it later on, I can easily see the role it's playing. And you are literally just working your way down the tree, working out, doing TDD on each class, working out what the collaborators are for each of those, and just working your way down till you reach the bottom. If you spend too much time going through too many layers, you've probably gone too complicated. You know, once you, if you're down 6 or 7 layers, then I'd suggest that maybe you might need to rethink things a little bit. Because the more layers you do, any refactoring means there's a lot of effort involved because it may impact multiple layers in your collaborators. So the summaries from this are: find your collaborators. What you'll be doing generally is verifying interaction, so verifying if you're using voids, so if you're using CQS, you'll be verifying via mocks that something has happened rather than checking a status that gets returned. It's a different way of thinking about writing your code. It is TDD all the way. I haven't done TDD all the way here in this, but it's trying to find the things that make sense or that are worthwhile showing rather than just doing the same thing over and over and over again. You can design at each stage. So at each stage, I've sort of stepped back and said, what's the best way of doing this? You don't have to do big design up front, but some design up front is certainly worthwhile to finding out what your collaborators are. So what I did with this is I end up with something like this. But on a whiteboard. So I look at the collaborators, so I work my way down, and the same the opposite side, and I work out the things that I need to work with it. So I'm not going in blind, I'm not going in not knowing what I'm doing. Wrong combination of words there. So I'm not going in without thinking about what I'm doing. I'm actually going in with a plan, but I'm not going in with a plan that says, these are called this, 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 and this. So I haven't written UML, I haven't written what methods are on there. You know, I'm still trying to discover that as I go along, but I think that's the type of structure I'm heading towards.
The point in TDD though, that you only implement sort of the bare bones. You need a variable, you implement the variable. You need a class, you implement the class. It's sort of natural. It's the natural progression.
If you can do that, brilliant.
I think that's the end though, right?
Yes and no. The aim is to deliver features. The aim is to deliver features and be able to then add new features over time and change things over time without having to undo lots of stuff that you've done. So it's not quite as simple as that. You know, it's just because you TDD something doesn't mean what you end up with is good. You know, all I'm trying to do is to say that if you start from the feature, you have to implement the feature. If you only implement the bits you need to implement, that doesn't mean that you can't, before you start all of that, have a stand at the whiteboard and think about how it's all structured. You know, you don't have to go in and say, you know, blinkedly look at one class, work on that one class, and work up from there. You know, this is just a very different way of looking at coding. So yeah, I like design at each stage. I mean, if you can write perfect code from inside out, brilliant. You know, if there were one way writing code, there'd be one book, one university course. We'd all learn it. We'd all be experts. Software development would be the best thought of role in the world, in the business place. You know, at the moment there are millions of ways of doing stuff. We find new ways every day. We find ways that other people decided were bad and try them again. You know, we forget about good ways. You know, lots of people have forgotten about this. It's been around for a long time. You know, it's just about using a bit of common sense. It's about thinking, you know, we're not going to write perfect software. You're never going to know all the things. When you write that first feature, you know enough about the first feature. That's it. You don't know what else is coming. You know, do you write and cover every single possibility, or do you accept that other possibilities will happen and you just allow for it? So there's a quote from Sandy Metz, who's a big OO developer in the Ruby world, who said, don't code for the future, code as though, code so that your code changes when the future arrives, or something along those lines. So don't try and assume you know what you're doing. Code so that when when these requirements happen, you can implement them. So it's a different way of thinking about it, rather than just trying to cover all the cases in one go. So I know lots of people that gold plate everything. You know, that will. You know, yes, you certainly need things like exception handling and all the rest of it, but you know, thinking that I know better than the business owners do in terms of business requirements is not a way to go, probably. On the other one, your acceptance test will fail for quite a period of time. You know, you saw there, you know, I've spent an hour and whatever trying to live code, and I got fairly close. I'm probably about 10 minutes away from having a person acceptance test. You know, in the inside out TDD world, anything that's failing for more than a few seconds is bad. This is not saying it's good, it's just saying that the reality of the situation is that you won't get the feature passing until you've got all the bits implemented that you need. So, where do I learn more? Read the book, buy the book, read it, ingest it. It is a really good book. As I said, it's written in Java, but it is very easy to transpile across to C#. And the other one is Mark Seaman's done a really good course as well on Pluralsight that's well worth watching. There are also some videos out there from Sandro Mancuso of Codurance, who's got 3 small videos. They're all about 40 minutes, and he does the bank kata in Java in 3 chunks. With that, I'm going to say thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. Any further questions? Yep.
Do you have a recommended resource for katas? You said at the beginning you like to do the katas.
Yes.
To build up your sort of testing sort of system. Do you have a recommended list, or is it just
there's a book of katas out there by, I'm trying to remember. I'll put it up on the, I'll send links up to the organisers. In fact, I'm an organiser for the event, aren't I? I'll put links up for the code and for anything else I can think of that might be useful. Yeah, but there is a catalogue of katas, and people come up with them all the time as well. Yep.
I find it interesting, your final acceptance test that you showed kind of right at the end, the one that worked, it still had like a mock in there, it still had your substitute.
It needs it for the clock. You've got no other way of...
where would you draw the line, just at the things that you just say, I can't do this, so...
Well, the clock, there's nothing you can do about. You know, if you don't mock it, if you don't control the date time, you're going to end up with the date time of now. And you've got to then test that.
Okay.
So any unit allows you to test within a few seconds or whatever, but that's the wrong way of doing it. So doing it as a mock and controlling the data that goes in is a better way of doing it. Because you've got no control otherwise.
Yeah, we do it within seconds, that sort of thing.
Yeah. See, I don't like that. That's the problem is if things take longer than a few seconds, you end up with a test that's not repeatable, because it will occasionally fail. You know, whereas if you're controlling it, it works. You know, and all you do is have a general runner that a standard clock that runs normal date time for normal code.
That's for the sake of having a clock implementation which is just, what, 4 lines long.
Yeah.
Being a functional guy, why didn't you just pass in a func instead of
So if I start doing stuff like that, people look at it and go, what? So yes, you can do that, obviously. So effectively, a single method, a single item on an interface is a func, for all intents and purposes. You know, so yeah, I mean, I spend quite a lot of time doing functional programming for C# developers, you know, and showing them how to do that. And it is a different way of thinking. But this is, you know, I thought the problem is if you show too many things, people concentrate on those other things rather than the core message, which is acceptance test first, then TDD everything else. And you end up with a better, more object-oriented code base.
So would you say this is the same as ATDD?
No, right. Okay, so there are three things that came out basically around the same time. So ATDD, BDD from Dan North, and this. All came from the same people. There are overlaps, but they're not the same. So they all involve talking to the end user, you know, and coming up with acceptance criteria. Where they go from there is very different. You know, so obviously BDD talks about given when thens, ATDD talks about that as well to a certain extent. Outside in TDD, don't care. You know, I prefer just writing code. But the basic structure of talking to the business, talking to the product owner or whoever, and coming up with acceptance criteria before you start writing code, absolutely, that's a crossover from all of them. You should absolutely be doing that.
And I suppose you don't have the tests that execute the acceptance criteria, whereas with BDD you would. So you've got the code, but you disjointed now.
So yes, it depends. I talked to, you know, I was talking about if you write given when thens with your business people, with them, you know, you can then execute that code, and you've got executable requirements. So yes, I agree with that, but I have real problems getting business people to talk and fit things in that fashion.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately,
You're obviously very lucky if you can train your business people to do that.
It's a constant struggle. But
Yeah. In an ideal world, yes, we would have discussions with the business owners, the domain experts. We would write something that was understandable by both sides and was then executable. So that would be the ideal. I personally don't think given when then and the cucumber gherkin style is that way. I just think it's a bit too awkward. You know, business people like talking in business language rather than having to structure things in almost computer language. I don't know, it's a difficult one. I've never managed to push it. I think I've never managed to push it because I don't believe in it, but you know, it's finding a balance, isn't it? You know, at the end of the day, we can only so Dan North when he did BDD, part of that was with Agile, we're very good at delivering the thing right, i.e. good code, but we weren't good at delivering the right thing. So we weren't good at delivering what the business actually wanted. So that's where things like BDD and ATDD came from. You know, and it's, I mean, I disagree. I think we've got worse at doing the code bit. You know, we write more code now than we used to. We write bigger systems, and we've got more bugs in most systems now than we did 25 years ago. You know, we're not learning from the past. We're not looking. Everything goes in cycles. You know, lots of these things like CQRS and various other things are things that already existed. You know, they've just been repackaged and done as different, you know, and given by a different person. But they still fundamentally make, you know, they do certain things for certain people very well, but they're not applicable across the board. You know, people just jump on with the latest bandwagon and go with it. You know, event sourcing. You know, most of our data stored as event sourcing. You know, and at least 50% shouldn't be. But it was trendy, it was the cool thing to do, so that's how everything gets done. Sorry, bitch and moan there.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think if we could just say another thank you to Ian. Thanks for coming up all the way from Warwickshire. Appreciate it. just a couple of things. The next two talks we've got, as we mentioned at the beginning, was the .NET performance, the JavaScript era.